G'day legends, I hope that you're having a fantastic day. Now, just straight off the bat, as you'll know, I'm in a different environment again, and this will be my last video for a few days. And this video may be a lot shorter just due to some time constraints and other commitments. But I hope that you've had a fantastic weekend and a fantastic start to the week. Now, what a crazy last 24 hours we have had with the hundreds of targets going from Iran then into Israel, and we will continue watching what develops or what doesn't develop in that space, as it could have huge ramifications for that entire area. And if things continue moving, then I will look at packing up and going across. But today's video, we are going to touch on how this could be both good and bad for the situation happening in Ukraine, both for Russia and for Ukraine, where there can be some wins and losses from a war, other strikes, and media going about this. So we'll talk in length about that. Now, you will see that I look down a fair bit. I'm looking down at notes I've got on my phone, as typically I'll use a teleprompter, so I'm not looking away from you being rude. But we're going to look at, of course, military defense updates. We're going to look at some footage both of strikes against air defense. We're going to look at potential false flag at the ZAP nuclear power plant. Of course, we'll look at the maps. We're going to talk about air defense, both Patriot and other systems, and we're going to talk about fighter aircraft and typically how they could be involved in both Ukraine and how we're seeing them used over the Middle East, and how this could come all round as one piece. But what it has shown between Ukraine and, of course, Israel is different commitments by the West. And I think the pro-Ukrainian side of the informational space is seeing this and pointing this out, that we see, of course, these drones and missiles that are fired to Israel getting engaged by United Kingdom aeroplanes, fighter jets. We see them getting engaged by US jets and other systems as well. Of course, we know the ships are, in the sea there, but the systems going from Russia to Ukraine, they're not being engaged like this. And it's causing many to go, well, what is the difference? Now, I think the difference is quite obvious when you look at the history between the nations' relationships, but as well as the difference between Iran's capability and power compared to Russia's, if there was wider scale conflict and ability to target. So that is something I think we need to be realistic about and not beat around the bush and say an apple's an apple. Well, it's very different areas of the world, different targeting, and if we want to call out differences and then alignments, well, it becomes difficult in this. But I've got a couple of notes here. Actually, let's have a look at this engagement first off the bat. So we can see this video here. This is IDF fighter jets here, unsure if F-15, 16 or 35 in the air. We know all of them were involved, but these are hitting Iranian missiles and drones in the air coming across. We know, of course, the drones move significantly slower, have a far longer time, but we also need to point out that a number of these came through. You can obviously see the drone here getting hit, but a number of these did get through that air defense, did overwhelm in areas, and had successful strikes. And as we've seen, say with Russia's strikes to Ukraine, the more often you can keep this up, the more likely you are, and you can see a cruise missile here, for ones to start getting through. Air defense is limited all around the world. Air defense is incredibly expensive and complex, and missiles like this all around the world are becoming more and more difficult to engage when you've got ballistic and cruise missiles in their thousands by many different countries out there. But I think this is what we'll talk about later with. That's what Ukraine are trying to do with their F-16s. The F-16s, I was talking to a guy specifically about this. To train a pilot in all the areas of fighter aircraft takes so long, in both air to ground, air to air, air to cruise missile, air to drone. These are all separate tasks. I was talking to a guy much more knowledgeable than me on this, and he said with the limited, shortened training, it will be more to try and, right, we're training this in air to air or this in air to ground. And I think, as far as my limited knowledge on this, the air to air, we're probably not going to see. We haven't seen much of it between MiG to Fulcrum or MiG to MiG or anything. It's going to be more that air to air of trying to hit cruise missiles in there and acting as an arm of air defense, or potentially striking carriers like the bombers, more so than a dogfighting sort of scenario. And I'll say that's not there, as well as that close air support. How's that going to look with the amount of air defense assets and air assets that Russia has in the air too. I'm getting ahead of myself, talking about where this could go and why it may be good and bad for Ukraine of what has happened in with Israel and Iran is, of course, we have the $95 billion aid package held up in the US. Now, this aid package has $60 billion for Ukraine, an amount for Taiwan, and an amount for Israel. Now, if that is to go back and get, that of course has passed through Congress, but it's being held up by the Speaker to put it on the floor to vote. But if it has to get changed around too much, it has to go back through, meaning it's going to take a lot longer. That many are saying because of the Republican support for Israel, and we see that with what Mike Johnson's putting online, that could this help Ukraine by then pushing that through, that, well, the only way to get further funding to Israel, emergency funding through, is by this bill. Therefore, we have, even if they're not happy with it, with say maybe the Ukraine stuff, then it then pushes through, and then Ukraine get their funding. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise, if that makes sense, for that funding to come through. Now, many people have pointed out as well that there was well over 100 Shahed-style drones crossed into separate airspaces, but were aimed at Israel. I mean, of course, over Syria and Iraq got engaged, as well as other areas. And many people have pointed out, is there going to be a lack of these drones? We know these Shahed-style drones are causing havoc in Ukraine. Now, where I'd push back on that is all the intel that we have doesn't suggest that Russia is buying them from Iran. Maybe in the beginning, maybe components, but it seems like more the entire production line has been purchased, like whatever licensing, whatever sits there, in exchange for gold to then produce them locally in Russia. And now that Iran sort of has nothing to do with other than the development and some maybe back and forwards, but I don't think that seeing them used by Iran is going to have a necessary impact on the use case or amount of them for Russia, but I could be wrong on that. It's just from my understanding of those systems. Same as like the ones we saw yesterday over Iraq were like the lawnmower motor sort of sounds came about, like the propeller engine, and the ones we've seen Russia typically use recently are the black ones with the jet engine on them. So we may see the difference there. Now, the last point I want to put out here of these sort of positives, negatives, we had the two positives potentially in the beginning, but the third one being replenishment of air defense in Israel and over the Middle East. This could hinder the available amount to the available amount of air defense to Ukraine. There was reported already a shortage worldwide of air defense, and with tensions for a wider conflict, air defense will need to be bolstered in other areas. So, of course, like American bases in Jordan, areas like this are going to want their air defense at full capacity. Israel's going to have to replenish all the Patriots and stuff that got fired. Other places around the world, of course, bolstering up that. We know that these systems are very expensive, very complex, and hard to make. How is that going to go? Of course, we're going to look at air defense. We know Ukraine has been promised one more Patriot system. But my fourth point on this is informational. That I think the worst thing to happen for the war in Ukraine was the war that happened in Israel-Gaza. Is that conflict and that escalation, because it took it out of the headlines and it put it on the back rung. That the informational war is, I think people are going to keep up with one at a time, and this one's sort of the newer one that may have more effect and is seeing, at least that's, say, in Australia, maybe it's different in Europe, but I think that informational space is difficult. And taking this media away from Ukraine, which now Ukraine at this time is losing more ground on the front line, I think this will raise more questions and doubts about the future of that conflict and how it's going to go, stepping into these, I don't even want to call it a peace meeting that they're having in Switzerland, because unless you've got both parties present, what's your actual aim, personally? But I think it's going to be a hard case to sell there of like, this is what we want. But yeah, I think there's a big informational happen there. But maybe that could be as well, if you want to use some sort of mental gymnastics, it could be a good thing, being that, yeah, but Ukraine is losing some ground. They're having a lot more Russian successful strikes, or reported to have more successful Russian strikes. The eyes off it at the moment may be a good thing, so there's not more cast of doubt. But this informational thing, this isn't good when you have democratic elected countries with elections coming soon, and this maybe being on the back step, but needing tens and tens, if not hundreds of billions of dollars more to have success here, if it's not a leading part in news, part of everyone's daily life, that could be a struggle there. I'm just explaining sort of all parts of where that could be and sort of going through it in my own head as I speak to yourselves. But let's talk about the Patriot defense systems. Now, the first bit of good news, I think, for a long time for Ukraine is that Germany has agreed to send another Patriot air defense system to Ukraine. This is from Olaf Scholz, but has refused again the Taurus cruise missile system. That system is from the embarrassment of the German high-ranking officers. I think that system's just not coming. I don't think Germany's willing to give it. Maybe look at other systems. It's like asking for F-35s. You can ask and ask. If it's not going to come, it's not worth continuing the effort there if there could be something else. Especially, are you better off with the price that Taurus would have having more air AD? But he posted on Twitter saying, "We stand unwaveringly by Ukraine's side." Of course, Germany cops the most shit of any country in this war. But as far as if you look at money given, it's huge. It's massive German support, and this is if it's a full battery, it's a over $1 billion system. So I don't think you can point at one system they're not willing to give and go, fuck you, and they've sent Leopards and all the reconstruction for those, all the other German Rheinmetall vehicles and Patriots, whatever. I think there's a lot when you start criticising Germany, championing France, when you look at the amount of money given. Just maybe Macron is more game on social media to make some propaganda-style statements. But Zelensky on X thanks Scholz, saying the decision to deliver an additional Patriot air defense system to Ukraine, as well as air defense missiles for existing systems. We know Ukraine has a huge problem with air defense and missiles getting through. For the next few weeks, there may be very, very little air defense left, and we're seeing those hypersonics, those ballistic missiles really, really leaking through. Now, Kulaba as well has spoken about systems potentially in Poland, reported here by RBC Ukraine. He is asked about the scenario of American air defense system in Poland, cover the skies. He said, now it is realistic. In fact, this would protect NATO countries from strikes of drones or missiles on their territory. Now, I can tell you for a fact, on the west of Poland, I have seen myself Patriot missile systems here that are protecting from things crossing in, although we have seen things cross and not been shot down. Both Ukrainian interceptors have gone into Poland, and as well reported Russian drones and missiles have crossed in areas too. But what he, of course, is hoping here is that these will have an overlap out into areas of Ukraine and will engage over Ukraine as well. What's going to be critical, if Russia has more and more power in the sky, there will be targeting of aid crossing through these Lviv, Lutsk areas, I believe, as well. But he has said, noted different solutions are being considered during negotiations with partners who could share air defense systems with Ukraine. When we are sitting behind closed doors, I tell all our partners, dear friends, whatever you want to lease, let's lease. If you want it to cover your border, it will cover your border, but give it to us. And of course, we know Kulaba said that he doesn't want to play nice. Leases, loans, whatever, will be forgiven likely at these wars. We've spoken about these. Now, of course, speaking of Israel, Ukraine here, Zelensky has had multiple interviews and multiple posts online talking about condemning what has happened between Iran and Israel with those strikes in, but also has taken the opportunity to talk about how then his country, of course, Zelensky is Jewish, but how he says that, we've been dealing with this reaffirms why we need more systems. He's taken that opportunity, saying rhetoric does not protect skies. Thoughts do not limit the production of terrorist missiles and drones. The fact that we in Ukraine have been waiting months for the vital assistance package, and we're still waiting for a vote in the US Congress. So talking about these states, what is happening, and against those drones, missiles going in. But I think the situations, the relationships of countries, the sharing of information, it is different. People won't like me saying it, but it is different, as well as the situation around surrounding countries as well. And a global outreach can be very different too. Now, we need to look at some air defense systems that have been potentially destroyed. Now, I say potentially because there is some doubt around this one. So this is a Ukrainian TRML-4D radar for an RST launcher as well. So we have the radar and the launcher here. Now, seen on this Russian drone here, and then a strike against the system, the radar here. Give it a second. And then just to the bottom of your screen, we'll see the strike then there. Now, people are saying that we don't see that typical cook-off that we would maybe see with an air defense system, that we normally see that sort of firework display, and saying that this was a decoy. Now, I can't say if it is or not, and people saying the way this is burning doesn't seem like this system. It seems like a decoy rather than steel and diesel and oil, and I don't know. I'm just presenting that this is what is being reported, that this system has been destroyed. Of course, any air defense in Ukraine getting hit is a really, really bad thing currently, but we do know that there are decoys floating out there too. So, again, unsure. I'm just showing you what I see. And then we do have a Russian book here, has been hit by a Ukrainian system as well, and you'll see I'm talking about this cook-off that we see. So this is then giving a target indication of where it is, and then that massive cook-off of Russian book air defense too. So just presenting what is happening there. Now let's talk about fighter aircraft. I showed you the IDF jet intercepting the drones. This is likely what Ukraine's going to want to do with them, use them as an extension air defense asset more so than a frontline asset. I just think the amount that Ukraine has got, the more they're on the front line, the more likely they are to be lost, and there's not that many going through, or that many pilots training. The Ministry of Defence of the UK then put up this for Ukrainian pilots to undergone intensive training under the guidance of the Royal Air Force. So the first one's through, as you can see here, flying like a small propeller style plane and in a simulator here. We're not sure what level of training it's actually got at this level before they've gone or then on to France. So at some point we will start seeing those through. Now, we've talked a lot about Russian Su-57s, the Gen 4 plus Gen 5 stealth style F-22 style J-12 style-ish aircraft from Russia, of course in very limited numbers, but we know they exist and they're airborne. About have these been involved in the conflict? There's been a lot of speculation, but Fighter Bomber, of course, who's very reliable with things, then shared this screenshot. I'm not sure where this is from, but alarm in Kiev and a number of regions, missile danger in the air, Su-57, possible launches of KH-59 Mark II and X-69, I'll call it an X-69 air missile. Now this X-69, this is the sort of upper variant that's come following the KH-59 that we know is incredibly difficult from Ukraine. It's saying it's incredibly difficult to shoot down, that it's a subsonic cruise missile that can be at 20 meters terrain tracking and hit targets. We have seen it have successful hits on target. Ukraine was reporting 50% hits, what could be higher. Now, this missile was specifically made for the bomb bay, within the bomb bay of the Su-57. So this was shared, and then Fighter Bomber, who we know has some knowledge here, I think he's hinting at saying here, but this is him saying, it seems to me that it's difficult to find a more beautiful proof about the participation of the Su-57 in the Northern Military District. Crests Ukraine have trouble after trouble every day. The new missiles from, then minus the electric power station by these same missiles, and the Su-57, of which there are 2 to 3 left, then minus the village. So I'm not really sure what's happening in here, but he speaks very much like this. Can be hard to sort of decipher what Fighter Bomber is on about, but I think maybe those aircraft have entered the fight as well. We know those drones to go along with them. Sitting back, I don't think they want to put them in any risk because of just the fallout if that got shot down and captured parts of those aircraft, as well as the propaganda loss if that went down. They don't have them in that many, but we do know that like Rostec are trying to produce more of those. Now, let's have a look at the map. I just want to show you. So here's Ukraine, the capital of Kiev. Red areas occupied since 22, purple since 14. This is, of course, Dnipro running through here. Now, in here we see this is an Adar nuclear power plant. Of course, this is a cooling pond, and this was significantly low for a while after Novikhovka Dam, through an attack, was then taken down. I'll let you guys argue in the comments about who took that down. I'm just here to present the information, but the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine has released this. According to, just before I talk about this, we know there's been several drone strikes on this facility over the past week. Now, the IAEA has condemned this. No one has called out exactly who it was, and people online are calling me out for not saying exactly who it was. I'll let you guys read between the lines. I've even read people going, you are insulting our intelligence by not telling us who it was. I'll let it up to you guys to decide who it was. But according to available intel data, Russian terrorists are preparing to carry out another provocation at the Zap nuclear power plant, another operation under a false flag. Russia is the only terrorist in the world that holds a nuclear plant hostage and uses it to blackmail Ukraine and the whole world. No one else except Russian terrorists have brought the world to disaster, close to the brink of a deliberate radiation disaster. But we do know there has been Ukrainian assault, ground assaults towards this power plant. Actually happened on the same day the IAEA inspectors were coming around through Stepnohursk, were allowed through here, as well as there has been strikes, drone and artillery into here. But we do know as well, Russia has kept military equipment in here as well as landmines, and some areas were off limits to some of the inspectors as well. Only in recent weeks, Russia has already tried several times to transfer responsibility for the use of drones attack the ZNPP facilities onto Ukraine. These are deliberate Russian actions that continue the same Russian practice of blackmailing our state and the entire international community with the risk of disaster here. Ukraine has always taken a responsible approach to the safety of nuclear facilities. Only to return the ZNPP to the control of Ukraine can restore the real safety of the plant. We have spoken, and I saw a comment, I'm not sure if this is true, so grain of salt here, but someone quoted Putin as saying he actually wants to restart the facility here. Russia, of course, and Ukraine, Soviet countries at one point, the Soviet Union had a very vast nuclear power facilities, so Russia and Ukraine still operate a lot of those facilities and new ones, and have a deep history in nuclear safety and operation of these plants here too. As long as Russian terrorists are at the ZNPP and keep their military equipment there, have the opportunity to conduct their operations, the station's safety cannot be guaranteed. But what I ask is, who would benefit more from an ecological or radiological disaster in false flag attack at that site? That's what I'll ask you, and read between the bloody lines. Anyway, let's look at this. This came out and I pictured it straight off. This is actually in Ozcam, of course, Australian camouflage, with drone bloody safety on them. This is an M113, but this isn't as any M113. This is from my unit in Ozcam. I thought they all got painted in green and sent, but they obviously didn't. This is actually, so for those who of you are unaware, look at the road wheels here. It's actually got one more road wheel, these wheels on the bottom, than a typical M113, because the Australian Army, in its infinite wisdom, got to cut them all in half and basically welded them together to make them slightly longer to fit in a different turret, as well as troops in the back from Vietnam. These vehicles, I've operated these. I was mechanised infantry. They're a shitbox. Don't want to sit in one of those. Listen to mine, Dave's interview, if you'd like to know more. So let's have a look at the maps. Let's look at what has changed. We've missed the day yesterday. So we'll have a look in Avdiivka. We can see just out here from Stepove that there has been a increase in Russian control here. Let's go to 13th, 14th, and then up to today. We can see that movement. And this movement has been confirmed across multiple different maps. We have then the NOAA reports show this same movement. We have, not on that one, this one as well. So number 2 here, maybe in this spot for me, is Syriac map showing this advancement down the railway in the same area just above Badachi. Would sit down here on this map, but we can see Badachi here capturing new position following resumption of advancing the sector on the outskirts of Novokolony. We can speak of the start of the operation to take the next area. So taking out into here and trying, I guess, to envelope this area like we've seen Russia do successfully in other areas at the front line, like Bakhmut, Bakhmut, as well as then Avdiivka, of course, more recently. We see this movement again just the day prior before it took more. So this is what was the number 1778, and the other map was the next day. Now, let's have a step back in this same zone. So we see this movement. We have another Avdiivka map here. So this is showing, down in here. Let's step back. So we see this step up and then no real change, but it is saying that there is then more movement out on these flanks here too. So this is, of course, this paddock, so movement up. We see this sort of chair-looking paddock they're closing up here, moving towards Natilove and Umansk further across, but no movement yet seen on then the MOD map. Now, this one here should be in my Bakhmut folder. This will make then more sense. So let's go up into Bakhmut. Now, there has been changes on this map. Let's turn this on towards Chasiv Yar, that Russia is confirmed right in and around these areas. Now, we've got a fair bit of mapping to look at, but NOAA reports, as well as these both Ukrainian maps, they are showing this same movement here. Then we have a look. Oh, sorry, this was... Yes, no, I'm in Bakhmut, but two separate areas. Don't worry, we're gonna get there. But let's look at my number one map here. So, showing movement out towards then Chasiv Yar. This is Chasiv Yar, so just above in Boronivka, as well as land made in this area here. We saw that a couple of days ago with then that movement right there. Now, Bakhmut, my map at number 2, just shows a small amount just above Klishkivka, so you can see where this train line hoops around. So just in here, we know recapturing some of the ground lost by Ukrainian offensives in that direction as well. Now, Bakhmut, number 3 here, just this further push in those same areas from out in through into Chasiv Yar as well. So let's line these up. So this, of course, the road heading through, showing more control of ground. But I think these are lining up fairly similar. But we need to talk about Boronivka. So we saw on this map a couple of days ago, we saw this. Boronivka, this area coming completely under control on the same day. Remember, the deep state map has signed deals with the MOD, but Russian Ministry of Forces reached outskirts. The Ukrainian ministry, refuted earlier reports they occupied the alleged occupation of Boronivka in Donetsk, saying the village remains under the control of Ukrainian forces. I think Ukrainian ministry needs to be very careful between not pushing people away from support, because people see this and go, obviously that is not the case, because we're seeing your own map showing that's not the case and every other map showing that as well. Now, NOAA reports map yesterday disproves this as well, this Boronivka, that the remainder came under control. This was yesterday from another Ukrainian source, same day that all came out. Now, Chasiv Yar, I've got another map here. This is actually from Deep State itself, of how it showed this movement. Let's step forward 2 days because it's slightly different. This movement through into Chasiv Yar here. So geolocation out in the outskirt here, as well as down in fields here. So there is geolocated proof that Russia is moving up in these areas. Now let's talk about why Chasiv Yar is so important. Rob Lee, a senior fellow of foreign policy, blah, 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 be an important ballot. Chasiv Yar is located on defensible high ground. If Russia takes the town, they could potentially increase the rate of advance deeper into Donetsk region as part of an expected summer offensive. We know in about 4-6 weeks, that's when Ukraine's telling us this is happening. Russian forces will still have to cross the canal to take the town, but they have now reached the canal southeast of the town. Immediate increased deliveries of ammunition could prove critical. So getting ammunition into these areas will be critical. Still have to cross these canal, but we're talking about in this canal here, crossings already, and especially the high ground and movement into Kramatorsk. Now, of course, we heard about when Bakhmut fell this time last year, that is Ukraine saying the reason they're holding Bakhmut so much is it could be that an open road through to Kramatorsk. And me myself have been here. I've spoken about the high and low ground here. So, of course, this is Bakhmut. This is Chasiv Yar. See the high ground here. This is why Bakhmut was so defendable. Ukraine could have all of its artillery pieces in these rolling hills and areas in here in defilade positions. This is why Bakhmut was such a hard battle. But we can see Kramatorsk, then Chasiv Yar, that this is all the high ground through here, and Russia is right up into, these are the two roads of life here. So this is Kromove, Ivanovsky. Russia's right to where my mouse is, somewhere here. That, the high ground, and then it really lowers out. They'll have the advantage of defilade the high ground all the way down into Kramatorsk. This is a very important area that could prove massively important on then the front line. So I've spoken about Avdiivka, Bakhmut, yep, both of those. Now, We just have 2 more updates for Nominals and Krasnohorivka. So we see Pervomayski, no change down here. Nominals, no change on this map for a couple of days. I believe this map is well behind what the other maps, even Noel reports, Ukraine and other maps are showing in this region. So we see this is where that reservoir is. Then it's saying it's a couple roads further in here, but that this has become encaptured in and around here. Situation southwest Donetsk, Russian army continued taking new plantations north of Nominals. On the other hand, Ukrainian army retreated from the southern trenches following the pressure of Russian forces from the north and south. So pushing up in here, both down, sort of clenching in on that, and troops moving out of this pocket down in here. And this as well will become a problem for areas at Konstantinivka and this closing up of like the Ukladar front, as we'll call it. And we did see just the other day, I missed this, but an increase in grey zone just out from Mikilsky, which we haven't seen any movement down in this pocket for a hell of a long time. Then we'll just move up into Krasnohorivka here. We haven't seen any movement on, we did see a grey zone increase. We did have confirmed footage that Russia had tanks and the, the Bakhmut moving down in these areas here and getting a foothold somewhere where my mouse is by what we are looking at. But let's have a look here. Of course, these attacks are incredibly costly, but situation west of Donetsk city. During the last hours, Russian army captured new dashes at the southeastern outskirts of Krasnohorivka. So this is the train line down here, and have captured these dashes in this area, of course, just out from 2014 held territory. So of course, incredibly hard. These areas are being built up both ways. If Ukraine crosses in or Russia crosses out, for now more than 10 years in some cases, but saying there more control there. And of course, just sheer amount of fabs being dropped in these areas and movements, that the further that line can push, the further those fabs can go in. We're even getting fab launches into, say, areas like Kramatorsk, which this is the problem with Bakhmut, is Chasiv Yar, every inch this moves forward, those fighter jets can come safely further and further forward. And of course, we're talking about 40 k's of range on those, can launch those fabs straight into Kramatorsk, which are landing, and then beyond if Russia is allowed to continue moving forward, as well as the close air support we are seeing occur over then Chasiv Yar. Now, we do have this as well from the MOD. Russian President Putin passed 2 laws to support Russian armed forces personnel fighting in Ukraine and their families. The first law exempted Russian service personnel fighting in Ukraine from paying interest on consumer loans and credit holidays. This follows on from October 22 law, which exempted mobilized personnel and other participants of the Russian invasion of Ukraine from accruing penalties for late payments of housing, communal service loan, credit card debts. Second piece of legislation signed by Putin amended the Russian Labour Code, which prohibits employers from dismissing widows of Russian service personnel 1 year from the date of the husband's death. The Kremlin has likely issued these laws in hopes of appeasing Russian service personnel, because of course it's not great being on the bloody front line. Financially incentivizing war recruits to join the fight in exchange for state benefits. Of course, Russia is trying to get another 400,000 guys volunteer. We do know from some numbers that Russia is getting like 1,000 guys a day, raising like a battalion a day. That's what I'm hearing. For exchanging state benefits to limit criticism of the wives of deceased service personnel, so as losses mount. Whilst any payment of holidays may cost the Russian federal government little in the short term, they are likely to have a longer term impact from the Russian economic situation and outlook. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem on that payment, but morale of guys at the front line and trying to put through better things for that to get more guys who are, well, we know there's mobilisation conscription every year, regardless, most of those guys year to year for garrison, but then they're trying to get more and more men as well. That we see that tactic, and we see Ukraine having its own problem with trying to mobilise more guys, morale, everything. Legends, this one's gone long with than I thought, but I'm going to do very little editing. So if you'd like to support me, links down below, but I won't see you for a couple of days. Look after yourselves, and I'll speak tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.